Hello, Volha. Going to get this up to date. Let's have a look. Oh, okay. Companies delete request. Companies delete service. Companies add request. Okay, let's have a look here. I'm not sure I like the look of these different services, but I guess we will see if they are. Okay, so companies delete controller. I see. So you've got company controller. Okay, I'm going to start deleting all of these. I recommend that we delete the commented code as well. For future, like it looks better, and if you're trying to like demo code, I know obviously right now people are not looking at this. My battery is becoming unplugged, but generally we want to keep, because we're using Git. All of our previous code is stored anyway, so we don't need to worry about losing it. That's just presumably the reason we're commenting it out. So we can actually just delete it, because if I want to reset, I can just do git log, and once you get a bit more familiar with Git, you could do something like git checkout head, and then you can go a few commits back with this, or with that one commit, sorry, we can go 5 commits or 4, or you can check a specific commit out by taking this. You can do git checkout, and that will check out that specific commit. So we should stop commenting out code, in my opinion. If you really, really, really want to leave it in, then obviously please do that. So first of all, the first comment I'll make is I don't think we need to have a company delete service, company delete controller, company, CSV companies, blah, blah, blah. Because we can just have it all in the company controller, right? Company, it's a broad term. This isn't that long as far as I can see. We only have sort of 60 lines in this class. I wouldn't really expect us to worry about breaking these up, so we could have these probably all in the same class for now. But I will only mention that once. So I will move on. So here, when we see this warning, it means that our response entity does not have any generics. So it's a raw use. So even if you don't know what you're returning, you can just simply add this. Then it's no longer parameterized. This means basically it's a wildcard. So when we have this, we're saying it can be anything, right? So you say a list of string, it's a string. When we say that, it's a response entity of anything. Functionally, this is not much different, but for example, I could have a response entity raw, and then I could return a string. But if I have and that's the thing, is people don't know what you're returning, and people don't know if you're only going to return one kind of thing because you haven't specified it. But if I say response entity question mark, I've explicitly said that we don't know what we're getting back, right? So it could be a string, could be something else, and then if I have response entity string, we know we're going to get back a string or nothing. And so when we have this, it's kind of giving us less information as to what we're working with, right? So we should, the future developers don't know, and it's if we're coming back to it, it could be a bit more confusing. So that's one thing I think we should start doing. We've got this in a few places. Here, this is actually fine. We've just forgot to, basically, when we do this, we put in an empty generic here. It will actually infer the argument from here, because it knows it's returning a response entity string. So when we put this here, we're inferring this argument. So when I do map, when I do map string map and I can do new hash map. And what I don't have to do, right, I'm just leaving it empty. This is perfectly valid. I'll actually show this in the code because IntelliJ will then flag it up and say that I'm being dumb. If I do that, because so that's completely fine. But if I add string here, it's going to show up in grey, and it's going to be like explicit type argument string can be replaced with, and then I want to see if it lets me read more there. The string class represents, oh, it's just explaining string. So basically, what it should be saying, but it hasn't got enough space, or it's not choosing not to, is it's redundant to say that, because we can already infer that it's this, because we're declaring it as an instance of that. So I will not dwell on that any further, but I think we should, but that's kind of why we can use that there. Okay, moving on. Let's look at the company's delete service. Print, add test, read process file. I like this logging, this is good. I mean, it's not real logging, but like it's easy to see what's going on because you've got explicit messages here. Okay, and we're using paths. Very, very good. Great. Okay, I'm glad that's something that's been learned, so that's wicked. String value, I think you can actually do this. Just kind of, or to absolute path. So and then to string. So it's more explicit here, because when we do string value with paths.get, obviously it works in this instance, but we don't. It's a bit funky, right? Whereas when we do to absolute path, we can see, oh, okay, it's like if I'm reading the code, it's very clear that I'm getting the absolute path, and then I'm getting the string of that absolute path. So I think that's a little bit better than. But it's great that you're using paths. I'm really pleased. We are adding companies. Take input file path. Input file path. Cool. Delete line by line. Delete file companies. You see, I don't know, the wording here is a little bit confusing, because I think I know what we're doing, but CSV reader. Yes, because when we say delete line by line, it seems like delete file companies, is that deleting the companies from the file, or is that deleting the companies in the file from the database? So I would prefer to name this a bit more explicitly, like delete companies file from I would say database, but obviously we're not using a database right now, but I think that's fine, or from DB. That works better. Something along this line, so it's a bit clearer exactly what we're doing. And then the same here, obviously. Okay, CSV reader. Do we need to close the CSV reader? Yes. Okay. So actually a very important lesson here, and I just actually talked to this about my other mentee. So basically, some things in Java need to be closed. So I'm going to go through sort of the try catch and finally. So let me clear this out of the way. So basically, I'm pretty sure you're pretty familiar with try catch. Maybe we don't know the exact reasons, so I will go through everything. Okay, so try catch exception E. Right. So this instance we have a writer, open, and if we have an exception writing, or in this case reading, whatever, then we can log that exception. So why do we have to use a try catch is the first question. And basically the reason we have to use it is there is a method in here that throws an exception. So throwing an exception, now apologies again, I don't know how familiar we are with everything, so I will go through from the very basics. So throwing an exception is basically just saying whenever so if a method throws an exception or can cause an exception, we basically have two options. We can either say, okay, we want to build a try catch now and handle the exception at this level. Or alternatively, we can throw it, and when we throw it, we're basically just saying any method that calls this method has to handle the exception. Now, that method can either choose to throw it, again, to further up in the program, or it can choose to handle it. So because this throws an IO exception, we have to use a try catch. So this is why we use a try catch, and this is the first instance of a try catch. Now we're going to go into another instance of a try catch. So we have another try, and we have try to open, write. I know we don't technically open a writer, but it's close enough for our purposes. Exception E, blah blah blah. Okay, so far everything's the same. I should really just copy this instead of typing it out all over again, but that's okay. And then we have something new. So here we have finally. Now, what finally does is it will always execute after the try and the catch. So if the try is successful, this works perfectly, it will still go to finally. If it fails, it will still go to finally. So why we use finally is certain methods in Java basically need to be closed. They open up an input stream, or they hold some resources in the system. So when we open up a CSV reader, what we're basically doing is we're saying that we're holding a resource. Okay, and so if we don't close that, then every time we do this, we're going to be accumulating that little bit of memory, that because of the fact that we're reserving that, the Java garbage collector won't pick that up. It will just sit there. And so it's just going to sit there every time we call this method because we're not dealing with it. So what we need to do is we need to close it once we're done. And so that's why we use the finally clause. So the try will happen, and then the catch will, or if it fails, the catch will happen, regardless of what happens in either of these control structures. It will always go to the finally. And once we're at the finally, we close it. Now there is a third structure, and let's see if this is doable, because I don't know about CSV reader specifically. But let's try this. Yes, it works. So what's going on here? I've added a body to the try statement. Now this is, let me just add some titles. So try catch. Try catch finally. Now finally we have a new, I say new, it came out in Java 7, I said that last time, it's not new at all at this point, but we have another way of doing things. We have try with resources. Now this is very interesting, because when we do a try with resources, we can do try, and then what we can do is like writer, file, whatever. And what we're doing is we're declaring a body here. And when we put something in this body, we're telling the try catch with resources that we are using something that needs to be closed, right? And so if something is auto closable, which I will click here, and I should assume this is auto close, it's not in here. Okay. Never mind, ignore that. Do not listen to me there. I'll do some more research to figure out exactly what's going on. Maybe if it has a close option, close. Wait. Oh no, this is the reader builder, that's why. CSV reader. There we go. Okay, so implements closable. Now, what this means is it will have a close method. And when we have a close method and something implements this interface of closable, we can put it in the try catch with resources. And this means that instead of having to do this whole thing where we add the finally and then we close, if we put the declaration of the object that needs to be closed in here, then Java will automatically handle the closing for us. So as soon as it leaves this body, it will automatically close it because this writer is closable. It knows what method to call. It knows to call the close method when it's done. So if we put this in the close method, then we don't have to worry about doing that closing, and we don't have to worry about memory leak. Sorry that went on for a long time, but I think that's very important, and hopefully that's a lesson learned there. So I like this. Again, this is good syntax. This is really useful syntax, the like declaring, and I imagine this has got somewhere online. I think it's really cool. I think it's a good way to read from things. Good logging. Delete company, add, delete company. Oh, wait, we have 2 delete companies here. No, that's, so we only want one of those. Okay. Country column, it's not necessary here. Next record. Company column, I guess this is supposed to be country column. That's fine, not a big issue, just a small typo. Company delete controller. Yeah, see, like we shouldn't generally. If we see like a good way to think about grouping controllers together is here we're referring to company, right? If we keep referring to the same resource, company, 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 then we want to we want to group all of those into one thing, because then it's company, delete company countries, delete this, it's all relating to the same like noun of company. So yes, I think I've gone over that before, so I won't rag on that for too long. Delete request, file location. Yep, that's fine. I mean, also, if you want to make that into one instead of, we talked about this last time, but if you want to make this into one, just these should also be camel case. It's not camel case. I know you know this, but just a reminder, we should always have things in camel case in Java, unless we're using a constant. And I won't do the F1. But we could also have, we could have this in one string, or we could have a path variable, or this or that, but that's fine. I won't go over that anymore, because we discussed that before. CSV companies add controller. Okay. Comments again. We just need comments. I'm going to get rid of line numbers now. Don't want things cluttering up my screen. These can be final. If something is only declared in the controller, if something is only ever assigned when it's initialized initially, so here we never assign anything to CSV company's service after we initialize it, so we might as well make it final. Companies, add company country, add company country, add file companies. See, I would maybe change that to like this. Generally, our method name should match our external name. So add file companies. I think that's a better name as well. I like that name you've used here. Add company country. What's interesting is this is exactly the same as this, right? Right. They are identical. They have exactly the same. So what we could do, if we could just call this file path quest, and then we could use this in multiple places. We should never use one thing should never do one thing should never do more than one thing. It should never like be an object, a God object, right? It shouldn't just be used for everything. But if it's always doing the same thing, if we make it generic enough that it always does only one thing, like here, and then it can be used, it's fine to use things in multiple places, but we don't want one thing that's used in multiple places in different ways. Here with a file path request, we can use it in exactly the same way in every place it's used. So that's something to note that we can have just, I will go back to moving on. File path request, get company. Add file companies. We don't need these if they're not being used. Add folder, and what we could do here is, no, actually I won't worry about that. No, I haven't got time to do that now. I will, but that's another thing we can go over, is overriding two strings to make things a bit easier for us. So add file companies. Add line by line. Again, I would say, this one is a bit better, but I would say add companies to db line by to db from file. Or we don't even need to say from file necessarily. We could say line by line if you want, if we're keeping it in your format. So line by line. But generally, like line by line is kind of, we're saying how the method works, right? We don't usually need to say how the method works in its title. How, like, the title of a method should just be a verb of what's being done. So add companies to db from file is fine. I mean, some people might argue you don't need to say it's from file because we're already passing a file path, so it could be inferred. But I think it's okay, and I imagine this will be completely fine again. Next record, you could company. Now again, we keep declaring these. What we could do is in company or somewhere, we could just make these. So let's public. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily the right location. I'm sure you could find a better location if you looked around, but then we don't need to declare them everywhere because we shouldn't be declaring the same thing over and over again. And then we could instead just do company.country column. Or you could have it in the CSV reader, you know, and here then we want to have company column, etc., etc. We can replace all of these with, you could probably even do like using these tools throughout the program, you could do, you know, 0, no, and then, but then you could look through and replace them where appropriate. Because we want to keep it consistent. But yeah, then I would like to see kind of this thing. You don't have to make this change, obviously. I'm not saying you have to go through them meticulously. But in future, if you're going to do something like this, it makes sense to declare it once and use it multiple times. These can both be final. We've already discussed that. Basically, any service or anything auto-wired can effectively be final. This isn't even used, so we can actually delete this. Country to add. This is not used. So this is, again, we should be cleaning this up really. Let me just check. And this is the same thing, again, with the try with resources. We want to make sure, basically when, try with resources, you want to look out for it when you're doing input-output of files and when you're doing connections. Those are generally the two times where we need to worry about closing connections or closing writers. Yeah, so that should be kept in mind. Cool, yes, I don't know why we're saying yes, but again, if the logging works for you, right now you're the only one, you know, using this. So Add company, next record, company column, company row, next record, put to company list. Company service that this is good. I like this. Well, then we have everything in company service. So this is actually, I actually like that we have our list is being accessed in only one place, which is great. Okay. Again, I won't clean up all of these, but yeah, like the comments are, yeah, again, beating a dead horse. Let's check if there are any other new files. Otherwise, I think I will rip this. CSV reader service. CSV reader, try with resources. Again, we should be putting that there or using finally to close it. Put to company countries. What application, no spaces. This is duplicated apparently. Let's see what that means. This is done in CSV reader service and CSV read service. So we have two services to do the same thing. Seems like. Yeah, we have CSV read service. So we won't want to get rid of one of them basically. We don't need to have two. But I will keep going through here. No. Yeah, but generally, it seems like you just move things to here to do auto-generated catch block. Okay, I like that you're using to-dos, but I don't understand this message. But again, I'm not going to critique it to do. That's too far for me. If it works for you, it works for you. Again, file writer will have a close, so output file should not be called file writer as well, because that is file writer should not be called output file. It should be called file writer or output file writer, because it's not the output file, it is a writer, because we need to close it. I should have mentioned these things before, but I was talking about this with someone else today, and I figured now was a good time to bring all this up. There's some other stuff I want to bring up with this, but I don't really think I have time for now. Oh, we do have a finally here. Okay, so you are using finally somewhere. Finally block cannot. Yeah, I see. So you're trying to use the finally here, I guess, to stop this problem, but basically it's unnecessary because we're always actually reaching. Oh no, we're not always reaching. Why is it having a problem then? Finally block cannot complete normally. Okay. Oh, I think, wait. Catch. This is, okay, I don't like this. Deletion successful. We shouldn't do that as well. That's not, yeah, finally does not mean deletion is successful. So, I would be careful about that. Finally, it always goes to a finally regardless of whether it completes. Let me fix this for you because I think there was some struggle here with exactly what was going on. So, okay, it wants to return a boolean of whether the file was deleted. So, file deleted true. Why is files deleted true? Files delete if exist. And this returns boolean. Then we could do the reason why there is an issue. Okay, so let's look at this because this isn't so. This is actually something I think we could improve on here. So this bit of code, we have files to delete, get the path, that's fine. This also should be called result file, it is not a constant. Directory path, files to delete, paths.get, again, this is good. I would prefer it if we did it this way. But this, I still really love that you're using paths, so I'm not going to be too... files to delete, file to delete. Path. Cool. File deleted true. Now this is where I have the issues. Is we're saying file it defaults to true. Okay, and then we're returning it here. So what's actually happening here is, does this exception make sense? Directory not empty. So I guess this is throwing various different exceptions. I see, so it could be any specific type of those. Right, so it could be a file. Yes, yeah, I see. Does this exception make sense? Yes. So basically, no such file. I don't really like this, or what I would prefer to do. But I'll explain what's wrong with this first. So we're saying file deleted is true. We're assuming something's working by default, which is usually not the way to go. It would be better if we wanted to do this kind of approach, say file deleted is false, and then when something's proved to be working, then we return true. Files.delete if exists. Okay, so this is actually where all of the work is being done, and this returns a boolean, right? So what we'd want to do is, if we're doing that approach, is we'd want to say if this returns true, then it's true, and then instead we return file deleted at the bottom. If we're doing this approach, and then here no such output, so it's false otherwise, right? And then here we don't. There's no reason to return that because we're returning it here anyway. So this is kind of the approach that you had here, where we're using this file deleted. This would work. And we're logging here, but usually I don't think we want to ignore the exception entirely. It'll be better if we could you can actually do system.error, which will make things red, and I don't know if it will let you do this, but I think you can do E. No, but you can do this. And then what this will do is it will print the exception. Never mind. Let's just do e.printStackTrace. I think this is better. Then we get more information, because if we do this and you misunderstand the problem, so let's say I write, insufficient permissions here, which is incorrect, right? Permissions. This is wrong. Because I'm writing this myself and it's not coming from the exception, we could get confused here. We could say, why does it say insufficient permissions? Because we're writing this ourselves. Whereas if it comes from the exception directly, like e.printStackTrace, then we're not going to have a problem. And we can also do this here. E.print, because we're not actually doing anything different other than the message. So what we can do is we can also collapse all the catch blocks. So what this does is, this means no such file exception or directory not empty exception. So it's either of them because it does the same thing. Now what I'm doing here is I'm collapsing this into the same one, and because no such file exception, this is an instance of an IO exception, because if I go here, then we see extend. So there's like a chain of the first exception extends the file system exception, and that extends an IO exception. So when I'm actually saying an IO exception, this is an instance of an IO exception, it's just more specific. And it's the same with this. If we go into here, then we go into here, it's the same thing. So let's just go back, and then if I collapse this, it all happens in one. So because we have the same response for everything, we might as well just put it all in one. But what I actually would prefer to do is simply return this, and then otherwise return false. Because if it fails, if this method fails or throws an exception, it's not worked. It will only return true if it works, right? So if it fails, we want to print the exception, and then we can return false. Or you can even move this return false into the catch block to be more explicit. And it wasn't working before, if I go all the way back to how we had it before, with this finally, because if I get rid of the finally, because you're trying to make sure it's always returning something, but here it's not actually returning anything, because it returns something in this path, right? So if you have different paths through the program, it returns something in this catch path if it catches a directory exception. It returns something if it catches an IO exception. But if the happy case happens, in which the file actually does delete and there's no exception, it doesn't return anything, because we're not returning this. And the same here, then we would also need to return false. So again, I don't like this. I don't think this is the way to go. But if we wanted to do it this way, then we could do that, and then it will be happy with us. And yeah, so I would recommend we never assume things work by default, because that's just not a good strategy to, if there's a problem and you just assume everything works, and I don't think that's a good way to get through problems, because things don't always work. And I'd rather it said things failed when they, I'd rather have I think we use the terms, maybe you're familiar, you say like false positive or false negative. So I'd rather have a false negative where it says something's broken and it's not, than a false positive where it says something's working in it and it isn't. Okay, I think I'll leave this one here. I'll get this uploaded and sent over to you. And I think you're in need of a new task, because I think I'm generally happy with this. You can make these changes. It would be great if you can make them, because we're obviously expanding on this, and I want to kind of... There's this whole idea of... What's it called? Technical debt. So basically, if you don't fix bugs early, then they build up, and then you have to spend more and more and more time fixing the bugs, and the less quality code. So I think it'll be great if you could fix most of this early and get rid of a lot of the comments and clean things up and merge all of these company delete controller, whatever, into just the company controller, just the company service, blah, blah, blah. But I think having a CSV reader service is completely reasonable. Okay, cool. Great, and I will hear from you soon. And I'll get a task sent over to you. Probably tomorrow. I don't know if you'll watch this tonight, but I'll try and get it done for lunchtime tomorrow or during lunchtime tomorrow. Okay, great. See you later.